Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for this first morning coffee with EBSCO session. So my name is Dean Kearns. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for the academic market in Sub-Saharan Africa. And I think today's a very exciting session. We're going to share something new with you. So what's new with EBSCO eBooks and how this is going to change the day-to-day interaction with eBooks. So how will you work and manage with your eBooks, and how will your users feel that impact on the end? So on that front-facing end. So I hope you all have your tea or coffee ready, and let's get started. So when we think about using EBSCO eBooks and interacting with eBooks, we always picture a seamless process. So as depicted on the screen, you want to see that ebook, you see your users interacting with the ebook, and they can download those ebooks and use them offline. Unfortunately, the reality is sometimes we don't always have that experience, and sometimes the users will get an access denied error message of sorts. And this is often due to limited licenses, which I know we speak about with a lot of institutions on a regular basis when we're talking about ebooks. You know, why are some of the ebooks only available in a single user license, or why do they not have an unlimited option available? So those kind of licensing limitations will sometimes cause an access denied issue or frustration for your users. And what can we do from the librarian side to try and ease some of that frustration and to make sure that we can have decreasing turnaway stats? It's one of the things that we don't want to see is high turnaway stats. So for this exact reason, and to try and offer some way of working around these limitations, EBSCO has been working for a number of years on a solution. And I know personally, I've spoken to a number of institutions, probably for the last 3 or 4 years, if not more, about how we can work on this and what we can do. So with this all in mind, EBSCO has recently released the EBSCO eBook Manager. And this is the first sort of public-facing session that we've done. So I know we've spoken briefly with some institutions, but it's the first big session where we've spoken about this. So to just give you a high-level overview of what exactly is eBook Manager. So it's a new administrative suite that's designed to help you manage your ebooks and your collections of EBSCO ebooks in one place. And with this eBook Manager, you'll get a better understanding of those ebooks and how they're being used, what the limitations are, and also how you can manage all of those ebooks to provide a more optimal overall ebook experience. And that experience will make a difference in your day-to-day workings with ebooks as well as the end users. So now, how does eBook Manager provide a more optimal experience? So the first thing is improved collection visibility. So at a quick glance, you're going to be able to see all of your EBSCO ebooks and the access levels alongside usage as well as a path to upgrade. And all of this will be seen in one screen. And I'm going to do a live demo in a couple of minutes where I'll highlight this and show you exactly what this all looks like. The second big point is to meet demand. So I'm sure a lot of you will get queries from academic staff and lecturers. We're looking for this book, or do we have this particular title available? So how's the quickest, easiest way to check if you have those titles? So by using eBook Manager, you can do a quick search for that ebook and you can immediately see, do I have that book available? And what licenses are associated with that book? Is it a limited access model? Can I upgrade the model? Do I need to purchase additional copies? And it puts you in a great position to be able to make those decisions when you have those demands for various ebooks. And then the third point, and I think that this is probably the most exciting part of all of this, is more control over your ebook settings. So you are now able to adjust settings for your entire ebook collection by access model or for an individual title. So to just show this in another way, I just wanted to really emphasize this point. Here you've got, and it just highlights that your entire collection, which is the way that our ebooks were previously managed through EBSCO Admin, You could adjust the checkout duration, the number of titles you could download at any given point, etc. But it was more of a blanket setting across all of the ebooks. The second one is that you can adjust and customize those settings by access model. So if you wanted your single user licenses to have one set of download settings, and that would vary from your unlimited licenses, you have the flexibility to do that. The third one is for a custom list of titles. And what this would mean is if you had a list of titles for a particular faculty or a particular course, you could create a custom list and adjust all of the download settings for that list in one go. And this at present is not available. So the list will be coming in a future release of eBook Manager, but I did want to highlight this for you as well. And then the last one is you're also able to adjust those in download settings for an individual ebook title. And I'm going to go into all of this in a little bit more detail. So at this point, I'm going to jump over to EBSCO Host Collection Manager. And I'm sure most of you are fairly familiar with this landing screen. I'm not going to spend time going over ECM, but if any of you would like a refresher, would like us to talk to you about any of this, please get in contact with us and we're happy to set up those sessions with you. Where I'm going to focus today is in this gray bar, you'll see on the right-hand side, there's now a new link called eBook Manager. So if I click on eBook Manager, I'm going to get this landing page for eBook Manager. And at present, this is broken up into two main sections. Okay. So the first section where your default landing is called My Collection. And what I want to do is I just want to orientate a little bit about this around this page and point out four main sections that are noticeable. So the first is in terms of search My Collection. So this is your single search box. And this is very similar in terms of functionality to doing a search on the EBSCO Discovery Service or EBSCO Host. You can do a keyword search here, and you'll see above the search box, it indicates it can be a title, an author, a publisher, an ISBN, whatever information you have, you can conduct the search in the search box. And all of the relevant results will then be populated in this results panel, which I'll come back to in a few minutes. Underneath that, we also have an ISBN search. And I mentioned earlier that, if an academic staff member comes to you and they would like a list of 10 or 15 or maybe 20 titles checked, do we have these titles available? You're able to click on the ISBN search and you can paste up to 1,000 ISBNs at this point and do a search. So what I'm going to do is, just for the sake of our example, I've got 3 ISBNs here that I'm going to paste. And if I do a search, it's going to search through my available ebooks and it's going to say, I have all 3 available. And it's going to give me a lot of information on the right-hand side for each of those titles, which I will highlight in a minute or two. The next area of interest is on the left-hand side is all of your facets and limiters. And most of you will be fairly familiar with this. It's very similar to the way we've had our EBSCO host and our EBSCO Discovery Service limiters and facets. So in this instance, you'll see the first one is an access model. So here you can actually break down and see how many titles do I have in a single user license, or how many unlimited user titles do I have? And in brackets, it will give you the count. So here you have 14 single users, 12 3 users, and 1 unlimited, as well as your concurrent access models and short-term loans. So as an institution, if you were looking to see what kind of usage am I getting on all my individual user titles, and am I getting lots of turnaways, you can limit just by the access model at this point. Second one is a purchase type. So here you can see the number of titles that you own. If you have shared titles, so in some instances, ebooks are maybe purchased through a consortium. So do you share some titles with other institutions? Or if you have subscription titles or a DDA, so a demand-driven acquisition, you can also break down by those particular types. We then have total accesses. So what this would mean is if you adjusted this period, so let's say we only wanted to look at titles that had usage within the last 12 months, you'll see here that there would be 5 titles. And you'll notice that a lot of these numbers are quite low since this is just a demo site. So we don't have a lot of eBooks and usage to display at the moment. But in your institutions, it would look very different. But you would be able to break down and see which titles are being used regularly and which ones are not. You can then also break down by turnaways. So if you wanted to, for example, see, well, in the last year, which are the top 10 or top 20 eBooks with the most turnaways? And that would then allow you to actually then go through those titles and decide, do we need to adjust the settings on those eBooks? Do we need to purchase additional licenses? How do we work to try and limit those turnaways? The next option would be your date added. So this would be the date that that particular title was acquired by your institution. So you can set within the last 2 weeks, the last 6 months, or even a custom range. So if you would like to maybe see within the last financial year, which eBooks you've purchased, you would be able to do that. We then can also adjust by your publication year. So here we have brackets that are set out. So you have a current year, your front list titles, your backlist titles, or all of your titles. And then the last limiter would be if you would like to just see which of the titles that you currently have in your collection are DRM-free available. So when we refer to DRM-free titles, these are titles that include unlimited access to users with no DRM. So when we talk about DRM, we're referring to digital rights management. And there are none of these restrictions on printing, saving, or copying of that ebook. And full downloads of that ebook are really seamless because you do not need to sign into a My EBSCO Host folder. You don't need an Adobe ID or even any special software like Adobe Digital Editions. So that's all of your facets and limiters down the left. And any changes that are made there would obviously be updated in this middle results pane. So across the top of this results pane, you'll see in this demo site, we currently have 51 ebooks that are available. We're showing the first 20 titles, and here you can adjust the number of items that you'd like to see per page based on your preferences. And then on the right-hand side, we have the view, okay? We have a simple view and an expanded view. I'm not going to click on expanded for now because it will take a little bit of time to load, but essentially what it would look like is if I expand this individual title, this would be the expanded view. So you would see this view for each individual title in that result list. And within here, you'll see a lot of the bibliographic information, some of your usage information, and download settings. Okay, and I will come back to all of those in a couple of minutes. The last sort of preference setting here would be your sorting button. So we've really included a number of options here, depending on how you would like to see that information. So the first ones are date of access, newest and oldest. So this would be the date that that title was purchased by the institution. So maybe you want to see which is the newest or which is the oldest ebook that your institution has acquired. You can sort by copies to see which ebook titles you have the most copies and the most availability of. We then have accesses, which would be an overview of your usage. So how many downloads or full text views. So we could see which titles have the most or the least accesses. Maybe you want to see if there's a title that has not been used at all in a set period. We could also do the same with your turnaways, which titles have the most or least turnaways. And then if you are using, or if you have purchased any concurrent access model titles, you can also sort by which have the most or least users remaining and your renewal dates. When we've also got title and publisher. So these would obviously be alphabetical listings of the title of the book or the publisher of that particular title. And then the last one is relevance. Okay, and a quick special note on relevance. If you conduct a search, so I mentioned doing a keyword search up above here, if you wanted to find a particular title or book, if you conduct a search here, the sort by will default to a relevance result, just to make sure that you get the most relevant ebook result based on your search term. Okay, so that gives you a lot of just the basic functionality around your ebooks and how they're displayed and how you can work your way through this information. So the fourth and the most important part of this particular page in terms of displaying your holdings is obviously the titles that are owned by your institution. So if we look across, you'll see there's obviously the title and the book jacket for each ebook. We've got a purchase type or access model. So by simply just scrolling down this column, you can see some of the variety here. So we've got this institution has some DDA or demand-driven access titles, where it's an unlimited user license. They have some titles that they own that are 3 user licenses or a concurrent access model. So it gives you a nice overview of the purchase type and how your users can access that model. And then under the copies, it will expand on that. So if I use the second title as an example, we have 1 3-user license. So we obviously have 3 copies available. If as an institution you decided you wanted to buy, let's say 2 copies of that title, in brackets next to this 1B 3-user, you would have a 2 to indicate you have 2 copies of that. And under the copies here, it would reflect 6, as you now had 6 available licenses for your end users. And then further to the right, we then start getting, I mentioned at the beginning, that nice overview of your accesses and your turnaways all in one screen. So I mentioned earlier, we don't have a lot of sort of actual information in this demo, but if we scroll down at this, for example, at the Palomino horses title, you'll see there's 7 accesses and 1 turnaway. So very quickly, you can get an idea of, is that book getting turnaways? Is it being used? And how do I need to sort of get involved and manage that title to make sure it's being used optimally? So that's the brief overview of the My Collection tab and the information that you're going to see. The second tab that I want to now move on to is the Settings tab. And this is the major component of eBook Manager. And this is where you'll really notice a big difference in terms of how you interact with and manage these ebooks. So at this point, you're going to now get very granular control over those ebooks and how you interact with them. So I mentioned earlier the 4 ways that you can set those download settings. So you can have your entire collection. You can drill down and have settings by access model, which I'm going to show you both on this page. We then have the custom list, which is a future sort of functionality that's coming. And then there's an individual title setting. So I'm going to go through each of those and show you how these differ. So the first option is we're starting at a high level, and you'll see here this section is your general download settings. So this is going to be very similar to your EBSCO admin settings. And these settings will be carried over from your previous EBSCO admin settings. So you can adjust these if you would like to. So the first item here is to enable full ebook downloads. So this is set for yes. And once it's set for yes, I can then make my amendments in terms of how we download those ebooks and how we interact with them. If I set this to no, there's obviously not going to be any downloads of the books, so there will be no settings that are then available for you to adjust. Okay, so let's go back to yes. And I've now decided as an institution that I want to allow my end users to download these ebooks. So how long would you like them to be able to download the ebooks? So you're able to set in terms of a number of hours or days or even weeks. And this might differ depending on the access models and information like that. But this was just your blanket setting. So you were trying to now obviously accommodate the 3 different user models. The next point is allow users to select download duration. And this is really a great option. And this would come into play using this example of 7 days, if a user goes in and they didn't want to download that book for 7 days, they only wanted it for 2 or 3 days, maybe over a weekend, or if they were going to be traveling and not on campus for a couple of days, they wanted to read that offline, they would be given the option at the point of downloading that ebook to select the number of days. So they could select anything from 1 day through to 7 days and then check out that book. And this really makes a difference. In the example I mentioned, if someone just wants that title for 2 days, they can use the title for 2 days and it is then released again, and the next user is able to use that ebook instead of it being checked out and blocked for a week. You then have the maximum simultaneous checkouts per user, which, as I mentioned, carries forward from EBSCO admin. A lot of you that have worked on EBSCO admin before in ebook settings would have seen this. And for now, that's set to 50 ebook titles per user. And then the last item is the full ebook download available only in the ebook viewer. What this means is, if this is set to yes, that means the only point where your users will get the opportunity to have a full download of that ebook is when they open the ebook viewer. So when they open that ebook in that PDF sort of view within EBSCO host or EDS, on the top right-hand corner, they would have the option to have the full ebook download. If this is set to no, you would also have the option for the full download within the result list and within your detailed record of that ebook. So it just offers the end user additional places to be able to access that ebook and the actual download. So now we're going to move down into the second point where I mentioned download settings by access model. And you'll notice in the blue block, I just wanted to bring this to your attention, this sort of information message where any settings that are done at this point at a user level will override the settings above, your general settings. So these will be seen as more granular, so they will supersede any of your previous general settings. So the one book, one user license, and this was offered within EBSCO admin previously. You could disable a download of that book, or you could set a custom duration. So this is not a new function. But where we really have made a big change and where the differences will come in, where you now have the option to customize your 3 user licenses, your unlimited user licenses, as well as your concurrent access models. So if we're looking at a 1 user license, it might be a case of where you want to ensure that that ebook is not unavailable for long periods of time because users have downloaded it. So you might wish to disable the download of these licenses. And that would mean that all of your end users would just be able to access that ebook online. And once they close that session, the next user would be able to access the ebook. So this would assist in limiting some of the turnaways that you might be seeing. But you might not want to completely disable the download. You might want to add a custom duration. And at this point, let's say we wanted it to only be 1 day for your single user licenses. Okay. We then have the same options for your 1 book, 3 user titles. But in this instance, we don't want to get too many turnaways, but we want to allow our end users to access these books. So let's say we adjust those to 5 days. And then where we got a lot of sort of queries in terms of allowing custom download settings for titles is obviously on your unlimited user licenses. And the reason for this is because these titles, there's not an issue with availability and turnaways. You're never going to have that issue. So it would be nice to be able to, and why wouldn't you want to offer a longer checkout period for those titles? So in this instant, you might want to set a custom duration, and let's even say we want to set that to 10 weeks, for example. So it would cover maybe a semester or a particular module for certain users. And then we have the concurrent access model. So we're going to leave the concurrent access model at the default setting for 7 days. Okay. So we've now made some changes, and these will impact obviously the end user and how they interact with those books and how long they interact with those books. We now want to click save. And once our results are saved, in the top right-hand corner, you'll get the green box to say your settings have been successfully saved. Okay. So I think we can all agree this is quite exciting, and I think it's really going to add a different dynamic to EBSCO eBooks and how we're using those eBooks. But there is still more, and there's more granularity in terms of these settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back to my collection, and I'm going to focus on a specific title now. Okay, and for this particular example, I'm going to use this title, Energies Beyond the State, Anarchist Political Ecology and the Liberation of Nature. So before I open this title and show you any sort of detailed information, I said I was going to briefly come back and show you, I touched on that it's an own title, it's a one book, 3 user model, and I own 1 copy, so I have the 3 licenses available. You would then immediately be able to see your total accesses and turnaways. So if you are having a lot of accesses and a lot of turnaways, as a librarian, you're able to then have a look and see, do I need to upgrade this title? Or do I need to, if there's not an upgrade option available, do I need to purchase additional copies? Or can I simply amend the way that my users are interacting with this particular title? So I'm going to go into that all a little bit more info, but I also want to just highlight some of this publisher information and this bibliographic information that's showed here in your expanded view. But what's of interest is your usage. So this date here, in terms of your access date, that will show you the date that title was acquired by your institution. So this particular title was purchased on the 7th of March, 2022 by this institution. And there is a DRM-free model available for this particular title. So I mentioned that it's a 1 book, 3 user license. And if I'm getting lots of turnaways, it's very interesting to see that there's a DRM-free option available. So I have an option to upgrade to try and limit and decrease those turnaways. And then the third little box on the right-hand side is your download settings. What this shows you is this is your actual individual download settings for this title. So I know I've showed you the access model and the general download settings. This will be the settings that are applicable to this title and only this title. So I'm going to show you how that will, that's going to be sort of the last thing I come back to. Before I go to that, I want to just quickly show you, if any of you have worked on ECM before and you have purchased titles, you'll be fairly familiar with this screen. So if I open up this particular screen now, you're going to see all of that bibliographic information that's available. And I wanted to just highlight a couple of things quickly on this page. So you'll see here, this title was displayed in my holdings on the previous page. So it makes sense that it's in my collection. We get an overview of the holdings, which ties in with that previous screen where I have 1 copy of a 3 user model. It then has your print and your electronic ISBNs. And this really comes in handy for if you have a lecturer that comes to you and maybe they're looking for a particular book and they only have a print ISBN and they say, this is the title I'm looking for. If you conducted a search using that ISBN in the previous search box, whether you had the print or the electronic ISBN, it will still route you to the same results and you can see whether you have the book available and do you need to upgrade, purchase additional licenses, what you need to do with that book, and then make all of your purchasing decisions from there. The next thing I always like to highlight is publisher permissions. So here you can see the book is available for download, and it also gives you an indication of if you can copy and paste from that book, or if you can print and save pages from that book. So as the librarians or the academic staff, you actually know now how your end users and students will be able to interact with and use that book. So I mentioned the DRM free. So here's the DRM free indicator showing that there is an option available for DRM free. And then there's also a button for find on Gobi. So for institutions that are purchasing your titles through Gobi, you're able to link out to the Gobi platform to actually purchase that title or to maybe purchase an additional license or an upgrade, whatever you would like to do, you can link straight across to Gobi to this ebook record and then follow through with that purchasing decision. And then the last thing to highlight is at the top, you're going to see, I mentioned where you could see your usage stats and everything, as well as paths to upgrade. And you'll see this particular title says you can upgrade to an unlimited user, which is DRM free, for an additional $30. So immediately, as a librarian, and if you are trying to manage your budget and see, well, should we upgrade this title or shouldn't we? You can see straight away, well, if I'm getting turnaways for an additional $30, I can make sure that we have an unlimited user license for all of our users and ensure that those turnaways are no longer an issue for your end users. So I'm now going to go back to the holdings page. And I mentioned that if we're looking at the accesses and turnaways, you might want to make some changes as to how you interact with this book and how your users will be able to access it. So when I expanded, I showed you that there were no download settings for this particular title, but it does prompt me here, click on the edit icon to set custom download settings. Okay, so you'll see next to each title, you've got your edit icon. If I click on my edit icon, you're going to see this pop up. And a lot of these options are very similar to the access models that I showed you previously. So you can disable a download. I mentioned the case of where it's a single user license and you didn't want users to be able to download that book. You can disable the download. Alternatively, you might want a custom download duration for this particular title. So we know now we've only got 3 copies available and this book's in high demand. So what we're going to do is, let's say we're going to set this download duration for 4 days. Okay. The one big difference that comes into play with your individual titles is this option here, copies reserved for online use. Okay, so an example of this would be, as an institution, if you had 2 copies of a 3-user license, so that would mean you had 6 ebook licenses available. What you could do is you could opt to have 4 of those copies available for download. And in here, you could say, I want to reserve 2 copies for online use only. So what this will ensure is that you have sort of the best of both worlds for your end users. You will have some copies that are more frequently available in an online environment so that you can limit some of the turnaways. But for some of your students that might want to download that ebook and be able to read it offline, they also have the option of those 4 licenses where they can download those. So what I'm going to do here is, because we've only got 3 licenses, I'm going to reserve 1 copy for online use. And you'll see the little information bar here where you can only reserve copies of ebooks with a 1-user or 3-user license. And this, I think with the unlimited license, it wouldn't make sense to reserve any for online use because you're never going to get any turnaways anyway. And then at the bottom here is, if you would like to reset all of this information, you tick the remove title level settings and you save. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to leave my settings here. I'm going to click save. And once again, in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the green box to say my settings have been successfully saved. And immediately you're going to now notice under this expanded record, under the download settings, you're going to see the disabled download function is set to no. I can download for 4 days and there's 1 copy reserved for online use. So if you're looking at a high level and you want to see, well, how's the book being used? What's been done? What can I change? You can very quickly get an overview, and particularly in this expanded view, because I can see my accesses, I can see my turnaways, and at the same point, I can see my download settings and make decisions on whether I need to make any adjustments or move anything. So this brief demo, I've gone over the collection and your holdings of ebooks, and I've shown you how we can download, or we can adjust the download settings for your entire collection, for your access models, and then this last example for your individual titles. In the beginning on my slide, I mentioned that there will be 4 options, and the fourth would be the settings and would be the custom lists. So this will be something that's coming in the what next section of eBook Manager. So what would happen in this instance is if you had, let's say, 20 engineering ebook titles and you wanted all of those titles to have the same download settings, it's very cumbersome to go into each title individually and set those manual download settings. It would be great if you could do them all at once. And this is where the lists would come in. So what you would do is you would select those 20 titles, add them to a custom list, and then within the My Lists tab, which is going to be populated next to settings. So I mentioned there's My Collection, settings. The next one will be My Lists. That will be coming. Under My List, you're going to have a very similar view to these titles. It'll have the list name and then the action or those download settings for that entire list. So this would allow you to then have uniform download settings across all of those ebook titles. Okay. And then the second thing that will also be coming in the what's next would be one more limiter. So under DRM free, let's say we've now, so I used this example where I added some custom download settings for this ebook title. Let's say you've done that to 30 or 40 or maybe even 100 titles over a year or two in your institution. How do you go back and track which titles have custom settings? So what we're going to add here is a limiter, and it will be titled eBook with download settings. And it'll also be a checkbox like with DRM free available. And if you check that box, you will only get the results where you have custom settings. So if you would like to go back and amend some settings or remove some settings, you would then be able to limit to just those titles and work through those titles as is needed. So before we sort of wrap up and address some questions on that, there's one or two things that I quickly want to highlight as well that would really assist you. So the one thing is when you're looking, and if you want to dive a bit further into your accesses, so how many of those ebook uses are chapter downloads, or how many are online full text views or full ebook downloads, you would be able to, in the same gray bar at the top, you have a reports link. So you can go into your EBSCO admin usage reports, and here you can pull your traditional usage stats even down to an ebook title level. So this would give you your turnaways for that title, your chapter downloads. It would give an indication of when you purchased the book, the cost of the book, all of that information in one report. And then the second report would be a My Owned Titles report. So if for a particular meeting, maybe you needed to show how many ebook titles have you purchased from EBSCO over however many years, this My Owned Titles list would give you all of the ebook titles that you currently own from EBSCO in one Excel document, which you could then use to sort of report back on the titles that you own. And then the one other thing is your subject sets. And I'm not going to go into a lot of information on subject sets. I hope a lot of you are going to join us tomorrow for Matthew's session, where he will also touch more on subject sets. But I just wanted to show you this section. This really comes in handy if you've got academic staff and you'd like to show them what's new in your areas of study. So if we take accounting and finance, you'll see that there's an accounting and finance 2022 type subject set. This would be all your 2022 front list titles. And the big benefit is if you have purchased accounting and finance 2021 and 2022, there is no overlap in those titles. So it really gives you the ability to make sure that your academic staff and your lecturers are up to date with what new titles are being published and what's available within each of these subject areas. Okay, and then in terms of next steps, so EBSCO has started enabling eBook Manager on a lot of EBSCO, on a lot of the ECM profiles already. I'm not sure if some of you have already seen this, but if you would like to know if it has been enabled or if you would like access, please get in contact with us. At present, the eBook Manager tab will be available for your approver profiles within ECM. So if you have sort of colleagues that are within the library environment and they would like to only access eBook Manager, we can also set up an eBook administrator profile for them. But if you have any queries on this, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to assist. So with that, I'm going to thank you all for joining us, and we'll now address any questions.
Thank you, Dean. That was very informative. Yes, there are some couple of questions from the chat and the question and answer. So we'll start with each one so that everybody can benefit from all the questions that were asked. The first one was from Cecilia, and Cecilia would like to know whether is a library notified if a title which it has had access to is removed from a database. This would be the subscription titles in that case.
Okay, Cecilia, thank you. So with your subscription collections, what we do is twice a year, there are titles added and there are titles that are removed. So what we do is we do send out notifications. And if you are not currently receiving those notifications, please get in contact with us and we can ask our eBook team to ensure that you added to those communications. And what would happen is then twice a year, you would get the link to say, these are the changes within your collection. And the big benefit with that is if there are titles that are being removed from the subscription collections, you are notified in advance that if there's an important title that you can't lose or that really is being used by your end users, you have the opportunity to purchase that individual title as a once-off to make sure that you don't lose access to it.
Okay, thank you, Dean. And then we have a question from Carietta Nell. Hi, Carietta. Carietta would like to know, are there options to download for hours as well, or is it only just days?
So you can also select hours. So I'm going to quickly go back to eBook Manager, and I'm just going to show you on the actual general download settings, but the option is available across all of those access points. Okay, so here you'll see there's the default download duration, and here I can set it to hours. And maybe you want to ensure that users can only access the title for 12 hours. It really does give you that flexibility to adjust that. And if we're looking at those individual titles, you might have certain titles where you want 12 hours download and others where you might be happy to have 2 days or 3 days maybe. So you can really have flexibility in terms of how long your users can download and interact with that title.
Okay, thanks, Dean. And then the next question is from Dorette, and it is actually in 3 parts. So I'm just going to take one part at a time. And Dorette's question is, when a library purchased 2 copies of one book, one user, does the client seamlessly access the 2 copies if the one title is in use? So we're gonna address that. So I believe Dorette would like to know if they purchase 2 copies of one book, one user, are they able to access the 2 copies, although the 1 copy is in use, pretty much?
So if you've got 2 licenses, those would both be available simultaneously. But if an individual user is either accessing that title online or if they have downloaded it, then you would only have the 1 remaining title that would be available. And this is where we could then look at that option where we can reserve some copies for online, because this would then lead to an increased probability that when users log on, there would be a copy available for them still that is online. So, Dorette, I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah. Okay. And the second part would be, are the turnaways only registered for the one book, one SIM user title? I believe you've already answered that, but maybe we can just elaborate more on that. Is it based on the 2 copies, the turnaway, or is it based on the 1 copy?
So turnaways would be across your single user licenses and 3 user licenses. So even if you had multiple copies, so if we go back to the example where I said an institution might purchase 2 copies of a 3 user license, if you had 6 students that are using that particular title simultaneously, if I tried to log in as the 7th student, I would then be registered as a turnaway stat. So it would then be across both of the usage models, depending on what is or isn't available for that user.
Okay. And then the next part would be, how do we know if purchasing the ebook copies makes a difference to the high turnaway? Like that, is there any benefit to increasing the number of copies?
So it's a hard decision, you know, and I suppose it depends on how many turnaways. You know, if for example, if you looked at a title that was having, for example, if we overinflated, let's say it had 500 turnaways within a month, you would really need to purchase quite a lot of copies to cover that usage. But you would need to work out, is that turnaway because there's a demand for a current research assignment or a particular exam that maybe the users are looking at. So it would really depend on what the situation and the scenario is surrounding the use of that ebook. But generally, if you purchase the additional copies and maybe make some of those adjustments I spoke about in terms of the length of time it can be downloaded and maybe reserve a couple of copies for online use only, I think it would go a long way to limiting those turnaways.
Okay, and Dorette actually just dropped something on the chat, Dean, as well, to say, no, sorry, not totally the question I asked. So if you do not mind, Dorette, just to elaborate more on where we may have missed the question. Okay, can somebody unmute Dorette so that she can clarify?
Mose, should we, while we're getting Dorette unmuted in that, do we want to move on to another question? We can loop back.
Okay.
Sorry. So she's unmuted now.
Oh,
should be
thank
able
you.
to. Okay.
Thank you for unmuting me. And sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, thank you. My question is specifically regarding when we have these one book, one user licenses, like the Jutta and LexisNexis, and then we buy a second copy, but the turnaways doesn't drop. It is like hundreds. How do we know that those 2 books are both available for the same time? So you have a record in the catalog, it says use this book at EBSCO eBooks, and it's got a link. Does the option then makes that any of the 2 books becomes available for whoever clicks on that link in the catalog, or does each of these one book users, do they have their own link? And if there's a turn, you know, does the user seamlessly be referred from the one title to the other? Is it a seamless function behind the scenes? And where does the turnaways register? Is it registering on the title, or does the one book user license have more turnaways than the other one? We just want to make sure that if we buy additional copies of one user book licenses, that it actually does become available for subsequent students who click on the link in the catalog, that if we buy 10, then 10 people can use the title at the same time. We're not sure that it's actually happening, and we are worried that we are doing something wrong and that we're actually still stuck with a one user for our clients because we don't know there's something that we must do. That's actually the question.
Perfect. Thanks, Dorette. That makes sense. So from EBSCO's point of view, when you purchase an additional license, it's not seen as a separate entity. So what would happen is, you mentioned whether it would be on the same link. Essentially, on that same link or on that same title level, you would have two options available. So it wouldn't be a case of where one ebook was getting lots of turnaways and the other one was not being used or not being seen. So that is automatically done within ECM, and obviously that carries forward into EBSCO host and EDS in terms of the front end user. So if you are still getting lots of turnaways, it is always tricky with those single user licenses. And maybe in an instance like that, we need to look at, should we purchase a couple of copies and maybe make some of them, reserve a couple of those copies only for online use, and let's see if that alleviates, because that should create a difference in terms of those turnaway stats.
Okay. Thanks, Dean. And while we're still having Dorette unmuted, we'll just go to another question from Dorette. May you please just elaborate more on it, Dorette, because it goes like, we get complaints that the alert function for clients that a book that were unavailable because it was checked out or all in use is now available for checkout. So if you may just elaborate more on that while you're still online.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. It may be if the options from the previous ebook manager in EBSCO admin, I did not pick up everything here. As I did the setting number 1, that if there's a one user license, nobody can check it out, because most of these are prescribed recommended books. So we don't want people to check it out. They must use for 2 hours and then get out of it. But if there are settings for multiple or unlimited books, then a person can check it out. And if there's now the book becomes available again, they're supposed to go an email or an alert to the client, because the next one who wants to use it must then get a notification that the book is now back in the collection and they can take it out. But we find that people complain. Then they say, but I've put an alert 14 days ago and I've set it to like 2 days. Nobody, you use it and it's done and it goes back into the collection. You can't have people hogging a book. And those people say they never get an alert that the book is available. And when they go back, they see the book is still checked out. Now, I don't know if that will now change with the new settings, or if there's a problem somewhere. And you can't find out what is the story, because you were not there when the user did the checkout. He just tells you, I logged in, I booked the book, and I never get an alert to say it's available. I go back to 14 days later and it's still checked out. So it seems like something is not working correctly for that thing. And we don't know where to go and check. Where's the problem? Is it a setting we are doing incorrectly? Do I misunderstand the settings? And we just want to make sure, because we want to start using this functionality now for some of these heavy use books. Thanks.
Thanks, Dorette. That makes sense. And to be honest, we haven't really covered, in terms of alerts and those notifications with this move to eBook Manager. So I'm going to need to just get a little bit more info on that from the eBook team in terms of what's happening, what could be causing some of those issues. So I have made a note here that I'm just going to take that up with the eBook team and get a little bit more information, and then we will get back to you. And what we will do is we'll, even if there are some questions that we don't necessarily get to address in the session, we will get answers to all of those questions back to all the attendees, just so that everyone has that information available should you be interested in that information.
Yes, indeed, Dean. Thank you. The next question is from Peter Duplessis, and Peter would like to know, do you liaise regularly with South African publishers to host their collections, e.g. Juta, LexisNexis, and OUP?
Okay, Peter, thanks for the question. We do, we constantly liaising with publishers, and it's local publishers and worldwide publishers. So we have a licensing manager in our South African office. So I don't know, I think some of you might have met Fikile. She's been with EBSCO a couple of years. And Fikile does work with a team of content licensing managers worldwide that reach out to all of the publishers. And we have those negotiations in terms of what content is available. And we obviously, when we're having those discussions, we want the highest user licenses made available for all of our end users. So we are constantly having those discussions. But if there are particular publishers that you're interested in working with that we may not have available on ECM, or if there are particular titles that you're interested in, please share those titles and publishers with us. And I'm happy to share that information with Fikile, and we can then reach out to those publishers to see what we can do about getting that content added for you.
Thank you. We've got another question from Carieta. And Carieta Nell would like to know, how does ECM know a user has finished using a book? I believe this is just similar to what we've mentioned with what Dorette was asking about the holds. So she would like to know, how does the user know if the other one has finished using a book?
So when you're logging into the EBSCO Host Collection Manager, into EBSCO Host, so as an end user and accessing that front end of EBSCO resources, when you open up an ebook record, at that point, it will actually say to you how many titles or how many licenses are available. So if it's a 3-user license and a user has checked out that title, it will say to you, there are 2 or 3 licenses remaining. So as an end user, you can immediately see if those titles are available. But at that point, you're not able to see at the exact checkout time. So when that title will be returning. That's something that, as Dorette mentioned, we would need to try and look at alerts, or the user would need to check back at a later stage.
Okay, I think Carieta would like to elaborate more, so she would like to be unmuted so she can give us more clarity on the question. Tembelihle, may you please unmute Carieta?
She's unmuted.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi,
Yes, we
Carieta.
can.
Hello, you all. I want to ask, why I'm asking this is the following reason. We had a similar situation with a different vendor where the book is supposed to be available after an hour, 2, 3, whatever. But I want to know, how does the computer know that the user has now actually finished with this book? Because if there's no activity, or if they've downloaded it, how does EBSCO know this is now done and they must release the book? What is happening in your back storage?
So in terms of, if you mention a session, so if a user has logged into EBSCO Host and they've opened up that ebook and they're reading through it, what happens is you've got a timeout on that session. So if the user, steps away, or, in a library environment, say they're on campus and they decide halfway through using an ebook, they're going to go have lunch or go to class, whatever it may be, and they leave that session open, the session would time out after half an hour. And within EBSCO Host, that availability is then managed. So that license would then immediately be made available. In terms of the actual technical, how it works, I couldn't explain the actual technical side, but it is all managed within the EBSCO Host platform. And then if a user has downloaded that book and it's not a DRM-free book, obviously using Adobe Digital Editions, that book or that license would then be set aside and would be marked as unavailable. And as soon as that duration or download duration has expired, so we mentioned if you're going to set it for 4 days or 7 days, as soon as that has lapsed, Adobe Digital Editions will release that license, and then EBSCO Host would then reflect that license as being available again for the next user.
Okay, so if the setting is for 4 days and the user actually stops using it after an hour or two and doesn't go back, it is still unavailable for 4 days. No, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's correct. With a full download, it would be for the duration of that download period. Whether they were using it or not, it'll block that title for that checkout duration. But as I mentioned, if you've got a single user license and you disable the download functionality, as soon as a user steps away for that half an hour session period, that license would then be made re-available for the next user. So that's why it does help and give you some flexibility in terms of limiting your turnovers.
Thanks, Dean.
Pleasure.
Okay. There aren't any more questions from the chat. I don't know if there are any more questions from anyone at the moment that we can answer, but from the chat, everything has been addressed.
Perfect. Thank you, Mose. And thank you everyone for your questions. I mentioned briefly earlier, if you have any questions, if you would like us to go through another demonstration with you on eBook Manager or on ECM in itself, please reach out to any of us. We're happy to set this up with you and spend some time and go through all of these settings with you. So before we finish up, just with everyone attending here, we want to do a quick draw to award a prize. So if Annika, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if Annika, if you can share your screen, please.
Gladly do. Good morning, everybody. I get to do the fun part of spinning the wheel with a little twist. So if you registered for the session and you are actually not here at the moment, we will draw someone else's name. So let's see who the lucky person will be. Just going to share my screen quickly. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, shall we do this? 3, 2, 1.
Okay. With
been because
Peter,
of that question, Peter.
I was going to say it's definitely because of the question. So Peter, thank you, and we'll make sure that we reach out to you to get your prize to you. So thank you for joining us. Before we do finish up, also just want to remind everyone that tomorrow morning session will be with Matthew. So it's titled "Turning Over a New Page: Gobi Spotlights Lists, EBSCO Subject Sets, and Subject Alerts." And obviously there will be more prizes available. So please join us tomorrow and for future sessions on Thursday. So thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great day further.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Mose. Thank you,
Thanks,
Tim
everyone.
Keeler, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Have a
Happy birthday.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to everyone for joining today's session. As Dean has mentioned, we have 2 sessions scheduled for this week. I pasted the link on the chat. I don't think I pasted properly. However, we are going to send the recording of this session, and then it is going to have the link as well to the other sessions. I'm going to try to see what happened there and try to see if I can paste it again. And also, we are going to communicate with the prize winner in terms of how they're going to receive their prize and what it actually is. Thank you all for joining, and thank you so much, Dean, for your insights, as well as Mose. Hopefully we'll see everyone tomorrow for the next session. Thank you.